Hey y'all, it's Katie. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to check out another one of my videos. Today I am so excited to be diving into today's video because it's going to be another ranking the last 10 palettes that I've tried video. Now it's not going to be 10 palettes, but it's basically going to be going over all the palettes I've tried since the end of December. So about 2 months worth of palettes that I am ready to sit down. I think I have a total of 8 palettes to talk about. So I was getting close to 10, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to be really diving into brand new palettes here, and I have a really good solid feel for all of these 8. So I'm just going to do a little bit shorter than my typical last 10 palettes I tried, and we're just going to do the last 8 palettes that I've tried to catch us up and just share with you guys some reviews of these amazing palettes that I've been playing with over the last couple of months. Now, a little disclaimer I have to throw out there. Typically in these videos, if you're new around here, I like to share swatches of the palettes and also all the eye pictures that I did with the palettes and any kind of demos that I might have shared over on my Instagram page. If there was any like real tutorials and stuff like that, I try to throw them in as I am doing my review. So I'm talking to you guys, and you guys can also see a little something informational on this screen. But this video is going to be definitely a little bit more lackluster in that department than my typical videos, because a lot of these palettes I was trying when I was very sick, and so I was creating looks like at my kitchen table as the kids were running around, and I just didn't have any energy to come and snap pictures. I know a lot of these palettes that I'm not going to have that many pictures to share, or I might not have like a tutorial to share or whatnot to be able to show you guys like how it worked for me, or you know, the type of looks that I got out of it. But I really tried to kind of focus on them the last week or two to at least give you guys some looks. So if you're kind of looking at some of these going like, oh, she didn't do, you know, she didn't use that palette too many times, only created like 4 looks or something, just know I probably created, you know, at least a handful more with that palette, because there were definitely some palettes. I know the Nomad palette I was wearing a lot when I was super sick, and I just forgot or just didn't get around to taking a picture that day before I took my makeup off. So let's go ahead and jump into it, and I'm going to rank the last 8 palettes that I've tried, going from worst to best. And also this is going to be my very first Palooza countdown ranking video. Always a long title, whatever. Let's get into it. Alright, we're gonna start with the bottom, and I should also just say that I didn't have any like serious horrible duds where it was just like I really hate this palette. So I'm gonna have palettes at the bottom because I have to put a palette at the bottom, but not necessarily saying the whole palette is atrocious. It just, out of all the palettes that I tried, it's not as good as the palettes we're gonna talk about later. And the first one we're gonna talk about landing at the bottom of this palette, number 8, is the LA Girls Young, Wild, and Free FESTIE Bestie palette. This palette, I think the biggest reason is landing so low is because I had such high expectations going into this palette after trying their palette from last year, which was the main stage palette, and it was a very brightly colored. The shimmers were amazing. All the bright colors that were in there just showed up and popped so beautifully. You know, the formula of the mattes were amazing, like so buttery smooth and intensely pigmented, and the formula of the shimmers were just like so metallic and gorgeous. I loved it. So that's kind of what was my expectation going into this palette, which I guess I should open it for you. But this is what the palette looks like on the inside, and I bought it honestly on Ulta's website. I felt like it was a little bit more saturated and intense, and then now that I own it and have it in my hands, it's like a pretty neutral palette with some pops of colors. But I was like, you know what, I'm still gonna give it a try and see how I like the palette. And I've created a ton of looks. Again, this is a palette that I'm gonna have a lot of holes in it because this was definitely a palette I was reaching for just to every day when we were going to church or whatever, and I was feeling really sick, I just need to put something on my eyes. I was going towards this, and overall I feel like if you like this palette and you like all the shimmers, what you see of the shimmers, I think it's worth it. If you grab it on sale, it's worth it for the shimmers, because there are a lot of shimmers, and I think the shimmers are beautiful. But the real dud in this palette are the mattes. I was pretty disappointed in the mattes almost all around. I would say, you know, over here, the more neutral kind of orangey colors, they're fine. There's nothing too bad wrong with them. But this black is a very big disappointment, and unless you use it first and like lay it down first, I have a very difficult time at making it stick and show up if I'm trying to blend it into anything else. And even when I do use it first, I have to really lay it down and really build it up really to get it to show. It's just not a very strong black. It's just very thin. It's a very like compact in there, so hard to pick up. And then the blue and purple, they're okay. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're very muted colors, and I think that just leads the whole look when it comes to the mattes in the palette to be very muted and kind of softened. And then this green was also a pretty big disappointment. Like I could see it a little bit in looks, but comparing it to the bright colors in the main stage palette and even the bright lighter colors in the main stage palette that I thought were just so saturated, were so beautiful, and you could see them whenever I used them in a look, this is a bit disappointing because it's kind of like the black one and just being very thin, not super intensely pigmented, or maybe it is just, you know, so close to my color, and that, you know, the color of it is more of a like subdued kind of cool tone type of green that just kind of disappears into my skin and I really don't notice it in a look. So that was just a bit of a disappointment for me personally. So again, not saying that the palette and like all the mattes in the palette are total duds. They're just okay, I guess is the biggest thing I can say. It was just like, it's a fine formula, I guess, if I had to use it, but I don't really ever want to reach for this palette because I want to use the mattes again. If I reach for this palette, it's going to be because the shimmers, because I do enjoy the shimmers. Most of the shimmers are a really soft formula, kind of what I remember in the main stage palette, and most of them are also very metallic leaning. They're very foil looking when you put them on your eyes. They're very intense. This shade up here was very chunky, didn't really enjoy working with it, but the other ones I really did enjoy. They were either more of a softer but still intense color, or they had a really like strong metallic look when you would put it on, and that's the type of look I like. That's the type of metallic or a shimmer shadow that I like. One that goes on easy, that looks really intense when you put it on, that, you know, can look a little metallic, and some of them, as I said, had a little sparkle to them. So I was really happy with the shimmers, but with the mattes it just really fell flat for me. So as a whole, this was just a bit of a disappointment when I was trying to, you know, expect things that I experienced in the main stage palette. I just really didn't see it when it came to the mattes in this palette, so hence why it's landing at the bottom. And honestly, I mean, it's a nice kind of neutral type of palette, but I don't foresee myself reaching for it and wanting to go back to it often. If I did like a palette bingo and I could pick and choose what I wanted, I would go to this palette for those shimmers because they were very nice. Okay, next up is from Flawless Cosmetics. This is a Tropical Paradise palette. Now the biggest reason it's coming in so low is because I was a little, not underwhelmed, but I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't more saturation with the deeper colors when it came to the mattes. I feel like the mattes in general all across the board are very kind of mid-tone, same kind of colors. So when I was creating looks, you guys know I like depth when it comes to my looks, even my bright, very neon colors. I just like depth in the outer corner, and I feel like it just makes the bright neon colors pop even more when there's a good depth and a good sparkle on the lid. That's what I like, and there's just no way I could get it with this palette, because even, you know, this dark color, this purple color, or even the blue, they're very, very light and kind of more of a bright blue, or, you know, just the type of color I would use in my inner corner to like brighten up my eyes and whatnot. There's nothing deep there. This shimmer blue does work, but I don't really prefer to use shimmers if I can on the outer corner, and it's just a little tricky to blend and whatnot. So I used in my first look, which I did a first impressions of, and I did like a winged out look, and that worked well, and it was reasonably dark, but that's as dark as you can get it with when it comes to this palette. Moving on past that though, I would say that the general quality of the mattes is fine. It's definitely more of a dry formula when you touch it, but it picks it up pretty nicely, and they go on pretty easily, and they, you know, blend and whatnot and show up on your eyes very, very nicely. I feel like across the board, anytime I use any of these colors, I could definitely see like, oh, that's a nice bright green, that's a nice bright yellow. None of them kind of disappeared into my skin. They weren't so light that they just kind of got eaten up by my skin or whatever. So I was really happy with that. And then the shimmers are nice. There's nothing sparkly to them. There's nothing super metallic, but they're very nice, very opaque, and easy to apply shimmer. So overall, I was happy with this palette, but it didn't wow me in that factor of like creating a look with a dark smoky, you know, outer corner that I would really love. This was definitely a palette where anytime that I went to reach for it, I was like, I kind of want something dark on my outer corner, and so I would pass over it. But at the end of the day, I was like, okay, Katie, you gotta like review this, so you gotta use it. And I kind of had to force myself to create looks. The looks are still pretty, but it's just not my preference when it comes to what I like to create. So I really had to make myself, you know, reach for this palette and use it. So hence why I am landing it kind of towards the bottom of this countdown. But like I said, not so much for the quality, just more of a personal preference. I feel like overall quality, it's fine. I feel like, you know, the quality with the price, it's a little high, so definitely a palette I would say get it on sale if you can, and then I'd be super happy with it. But this is a nice kind of companion palette. If I had a palette with darker colors that I could mix with this, I feel like I could have gotten a lot of really pretty looks. Or if this palette could have been expanded to have one more row of deeper colors of all of these, like green, yellow, orange, and purple, and blue, I would have really been into that palette, and I think it would have got it a lot higher, because as I said, the quality really isn't bad. Alright, next up we have Christmas Morning from Give Me Glow. This is a palette I used back around Christmas. I pulled this out for Christmas, used it through New Year's, so it's been a little while since I played with this, but I definitely do remember the quality and the experience I had with it. It was a palette that I enjoyed using it for the uniqueness of the color story and the quality of the shadows. I can't fault this palette for the quality of the mattes or shimmers. The mattes and shimmers are absolutely stunning. They're so buttery smooth and soft, so easy to like work with on the eyes. I love that in a matte. And then the shimmers, I mean, they're Give Me Glow shimmers. They're blinding, they're beautiful, and a couple of them have a little bit more like sparkle to them, but for the most part I would say they're like just really strong metallic foil looking shadows that are just they're gorgeous. But the color story is one thing that I enjoyed the challenge for a little while, but it was definitely a color story that was so unique. After doing so many looks with it, I was like, you know what, I'm done. You know, I don't really want to reach for it anymore. It's very unique, and maybe the aspect of it that doesn't really jive with me, or you know, isn't my preference about it, is that it's unique in like a subdued, almost like subtle way. Like all of the colors, there's nothing, you know, there's richness to them, but there is almost a soft cast to all of them, like the green and the red and the browns even. They have this almost grayed out look to them. So all of the looks I felt like had that type of gray, grungy type of look that I think is pretty. I enjoyed using it for the looks that I did, but it didn't quite inspire me after, you know, 4 or 5 looks. It didn't quite inspire me to continue using it. I felt like, okay, I've done enough looks. I created, you know, very neutral looks. I created some mixing the green and the red together. I created, you know, some with just the red and the white. It was fun, but I was kind of done with the color story. So while I did enjoy the uniqueness of the color story, I think it just wasn't a unique color story that I personally enjoyed using, and hence why it's landing a little low in this countdown. But overall, it was a lot of fun. Like I said, I couldn't fault the quality of the shadows. They are very, very nice and very, very beautiful. And it was also a fun challenge to try to work with the pink and greens together, because it can be a little tricky of where to place them. But overall, I did really enjoy it. I did want to, you know, put it higher in the countdown, hence why it's not on the bottom. But it's a color story that I enjoyed having. I think it's very unique and special in my collection to ever like refer back to, but it just didn't inspire me to continue using it past the, like I said, I think I used them 4 or 5 times between like Christmas and New Year's, and then I was pretty much like, you know, I'm done with it. So I don't know, palettes like this, it always is a little bit tricky to, you know, review for you guys, because it's not like it's a bad palette, but just for me personally, hence why it's landing low. Alright, next up is from DeDe Signatures, and I really struggle where to place this in my countdown, but we're putting it here because if I just keep thinking about it, I'm going to keep going back and forth. But anyway, this is the DeDe Signatures, the Neutral Wonder Eyeshadow Palette. And the tagline for this palette was, "Make the browns exciting." And I feel like with that tagline, it was up for a challenge when it came to me. If you're new around here, I'm not someone who tends to like neutrals. I don't know, I can do a neutral eye every now and then, but I'm definitely not someone who gets excited to do neutral eyes back to back to back. It's just, I don't know, it's just not very inspiring. You know, the browns and whatnot, they all just kind of mush together, and it's like, where's the pop of color? So anyway, I was very interested how I would like this palette, because it was a challenge to me. I feel like that tagline was a challenge to me to see if I could enjoy using an all neutral palette. And I decided to put it right here in the middle because I enjoyed this palette for about a week. And then I was definitely ready to mix it up a little bit. So I don't know where that lands in the whole makeup browns exciting, if it like succeeded or failed with me, because I definitely did enjoy this palette in the shimmers. I thought she put a great array of shimmers here to pair with the neutral browns to make it exciting to create neutral looks and still have a little pop of something, or just a little like intense sparkle in the eyes to really jazz up the neutral, you know, neutrals in your crease and all that. So I really enjoyed that. But still, there was that fact that there was a whole row of matte browns, and like the only thing I could work with when it came to mattes in my crease and on my outer corner were browns and a little bit of like a cranberry here. When I would sit down to create, I was like, okay, I'm going to use, you know, this shimmer on my eye, I'm going to use this shimmer on my eye, but then I was like, what am I using in my crease? Browns. So after, you know, a couple days, I was like, okay, I feel like I keep doing the same, you know, crease color, or the same colors in my crease every single day, and I was definitely kind of ready to, you know, to jazz it up and change it up with another palette with some color and all that. So that's where for me, I feel like this palette, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, and it's a palette, if I wanted to create a neutral look, I would enjoy going to this palette, because the shimmers in here, DeDe Signature does something special with shimmers, and she did it so well with this palette. I was super impressed. They are so intensely sparkly. I hope my swatches do it justice. I feel like I am the worst when it comes to swatching, and I feel like I always make the eyeshadow look terrible, but I really am going to try to make sure I can show these shimmers off to show you guys how beautiful they are in person. And just trust me, they're probably, you know, a little bit more beautiful in person, just because shimmers tend to always be that way, but they are stunning. There's just so much sparkle. There's so much shift that's going on there, and they're just so beautiful. For the most part, they're super easy to pick up and super easy to glide on your eyes. Some of them are a little bit on the chunky side when it comes to picking them up, because they are so soft, but nothing too terrible, and I feel like didn't make too terrible of a mess. But definitely, this is a palette with these shimmers. I would do my eyes before my face, because you got some fallout on your face, and any kind of fallout just would stick there and be very obvious. So it's not a palette I would enjoy using after doing my face makeup. But overall, I did really enjoy this palette for the, you know, I forget how many looks I did with it. I will say, to kind of nitpick this palette a little bit, and maybe it's just something I'm noticing because it really is like all very neutral, but I felt like the two mid-tone browns and then the two dark browns were very, very close. There is a little subtle difference between the two, but honestly, if you use like one of the dark and one of the mid-tones one day and then use the other dark and the other mid-tone the other day, I feel like you wouldn't really see a difference when it came to like comparing the two eyes, you know, side by side. They're just so very close. But with saying that, like, I don't know what else she could have put there besides, because it was meant to be a neutral palette. So for me personally, I'm sitting here going like, oh, you could have put more color, but this was meant to be a neutral palette, so I take my words with a grain of salt. But it's just something I noticed, you know, using them. You know, there's more depth in one and a little lightness in the other, so there's a little bit of difference. But honestly, it was just very, very subtle for me personally when I was using them on my complexion. Okay, so next up is going to be another DeDe signature. This is the Pumpkin Spice Quad. I know I'm super late to it because I think this was a fall release, but here I am finally reviewing it. This little palette was so much fun. I was so sad that I dropped it in one of the shades, the dark green shade cracked, but that's my own fault, what can I say? But this palette is one of those quads. Typically, if you're new around here, I don't like quads, but this is a quad that I love because it gives you one mid-tone, really fun mid-tone matte, one really dark matte, and then two fun, very different shimmers to play around with. And I created a couple different looks, and every time I would create a look, I felt like I could get a very different look from the look previously. And I know I have 3 to show you, and all 3 looks I feel like are very drastically different from the previous one. And I feel like that's just such like a testament to the quad and how well she put the shadows in and how well she put it together to allow you to have this tiny, it's just 4 shadows. Like I had this tiny little quad, but still be able to create a lot of variety when it came to the type of looks you could get with this quad. So I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I really did enjoy it. I don't think it's available anymore, but it might be. I forget if it was limited edition or if she's just been restocking it a lot, but if you can get your hands on it, it's definitely, if I had to pick one quad from her that was my favorite, the Pumpkin Spice is now my top favorite from her. I like a lot of hers, like the avocado and the blueberry. Those are another 2 favorites of mine, but this one came out and it just blew my socks off and stole my heart. I love a good orange, like a good bright orange. I love a really dark, gorgeous green. And then these shimmers are just so special and intense. I know I'm putting swatches up, so I don't need to touch it, but let me just explain to you that that real light shade, it probably isn't going to show up very well in a swatch, but it shifts from purple to green straight on to like a yellow, and there's also hot pink depending on how you do it. And the purple is like a very bright light purple, so it could be like a pink purple. I don't know. It shifts a lot of different colors, so depending on what you pair it with, it'll show up very differently. So I put it with the orange and it showed up a lot more like pink and very like goldeny, and then I put it with the green and it showed up a lot more like icy blue. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. I absolutely love it. And this shadow specifically is just so easy to put on, as is the other shimmers. Both shimmers pick up very easily on a flat brush, go on your eyes very easily. I used a little bit of glitter glue and didn't see any problems with fallout on my face throughout the day, and honestly not even a lot of creasing. I think at the very end of the day I got a little bit of creasing with the lightest shade on my hooded eyes, so maybe something to keep in mind, but overall super happy with it, very impressed. And yeah, it's a tiny little quad I could go on and on about, but it's really, really nice. I really did enjoy it. And again, I don't know if it's available, but if it is, and if you like the colors, I think the quality is fantastic and you'll really enjoy the type of looks you can get with it. All right, we're getting towards the top. Oh, these last 3 palettes, I went back and forth on where to put them. So I'm placing them here, but I honestly want to put like all of them at number 1, so keep that in mind. But anyway, for number 3 is Kaleidos A Flower Punk Palette. This palette stole my heart with the color story, because when they launched this palette, I was like, that color story is so fun and unique and so different. I just want to play with it and see what I could come up with and see if the color story is like so unique it's like too unique, or if it's so unique it's so fun. And for me, this color story, this unique color story was so unique, it was so fun. I created a ton of looks. This is a palette that I did not take many pictures of, so I definitely have been using it this last week to try to give you guys some look and some kind of idea of the different type of looks I've been creating, because I just was able to use it for so many different things. I definitely used it several times just in like this mauve tone when I was feeling really sick and I just needed some eyeshadows on my face to go out and, you know, take the kids somewhere. I used that a couple times, and also this grungy side. So fun. But you guys know my favorite is to mix and match it up. So I have mixed and matched the greens, the pinks, and this minty kind of seafoam color up so many times. It's been so fun, and I hope you guys enjoy the eye looks that I am going to be showing you on screen, but it was a blast. So color story wise, A++, Kaleidos. You came up with a fun one. It's very unique and different, but I feel like it's very cohesive at the same time. I would never have really thought to mix them together unless they were kind of put in a palette like this. However, when I was using them, it was always very effortless to get them to blend and to kind of place them and to get them to pop and all that. So I was really impressed with it. I had a great time with it. Going to the quality of the shadows, I really do like Kaleidos's formula. It's a very soft formula. I find that it's very easy to work with. I do feel like it's a little too soft. So the two palettes we're going to talk about later, I put them higher because I like their eyeshadow formula, the matte specifically, more. Whereas this, like, I like it. I like Kaleidos's formula, but it's almost so soft. Maybe it's a little too soft, and especially when you get to the lighter colors in here, like especially the pinks, I feel like it was so soft. I would place it on my eyes and I would start to blend and be like, where'd it go? And so I'd have to, especially this pink one, I have to go back and kind of build it up to get it. And you could build it up to see, but it was just a little nuance to the palette that while I do like the mattes, there were some mattes in here that I just felt like were too soft and they would kind of disappear. I feel like my favorite mattes were definitely the grungy side of it. I feel like those were a lot of fun, and it was definitely mostly the pinks that I just felt like both of them were just a little meh. I don't know. There's something that was so soft, and the color itself is so soft, it was a little annoying to work with. And then the mint was okay, but again, it's just such a soft formula. I kind of had to place it deliberately and then blend it out, or it could kind of just puff away and I'd be like, where'd the shadow go? I do want to say that this green, I for the most part didn't have a problem with it. I used it, I can't remember how many looks you're going to be seeing on screen, and besides that, I used it at least 5 other times that I did not take pictures of. So I've used this palette a lot, and there was only one time I ever had an issue where I went to pack the green on my outer corner and I was like, it's not sticking. And it's actually in a video I did a get ready with me, and I used this palette, so I'll leave it linked up here, and you can actually see where I was blending it in and it just would not stick to this one spot. And I kind of chalked it up to my eyeshadow primer. I was like, maybe I didn't blend it in. I'm always getting lazy when it comes to the outside of my eye, and I thought maybe I didn't blend it in right, maybe I missed that spot, and that's why it's a spot. I was able to cover it with eyeliner, no problem, but I chalked it up to that. However, in that video, under that video, I got a lot of comments from people saying, I have that palette and that shade always gives me trouble. So I'm just gonna throw it out there. If you're someone who tends to have problems with green and grungy greens, and you're wanting to find a good dark grungy green that won't give you a problem, this palette might not be for you. So stay tuned for another palette we'll talk about in a minute. This palette may give you trouble. Like I said, I'd only remember that one time, and maybe if I'm really thinking about, maybe there's one other time that I had to blend a little bit, but it wasn't really like a bare issue. It was just kind of like, oh, that's looking a little patchy, so I put more on, and then it was fine. So maybe like 1 or 2 times that I had an issue with it. Otherwise, it was fine for me. But since I did see so many comments on my video, I did kind of want to throw it out there that if you are experiencing issues, you're not alone, and that issue with me that I had in that video apparently isn't a fluke. This shade can, maybe it's the eyeshadow primer, I'm not really sure, but this shade can give people problems. So something to keep in mind going forward if you're interested in this palette, if you're looking at it. Moving on to the shimmers, I think this is the biggest reason why I decided to put it underneath the 2 that we're going to talk about next and put it in 3rd place. But the shimmers, while they are beautiful, like they are so pretty, and I talk about it all the time, but their shimmers are so pretty because they have a really intense color that is absolutely gorgeous on the lid, and then the sparkle that they put with that shade is a different color, so the sparkle stands out even more. So yeah, I really love the shimmers when they're actually on their eyes. They look absolutely beautiful, absolutely sparkly, so gorgeous. But the thing I don't really care, or I don't prefer about them, is that they're very messy, as you can see from my palette, but they're very difficult to apply on. It's hard to apply without a ton of fallout. So again, another palette that you definitely don't want to do before you do your face makeup, or you're just gonna have sparkly under eyes all day. So I don't know, it's just a little bit, it's one of those shadows where they're messy to put on, but they're pretty once they're on. So it's one of those palettes, it's one of those formulas where it's not my favorite or preferred formula, but since I had it, I used it, and I just kind of, sucked it up and just used it, and it wasn't a big deal. But when it comes to my preference, it's just a little bit of a messy formula. So something to keep in mind if you're someone who doesn't like messy formulas, this definitely is, but they are very pretty. So at least when you're paying the price to make a mess on your face, the end results is worth the price, in my opinion, because they're absolutely beautiful. So yeah, overall, those are my thoughts when it comes to the Flower Punk palette. I feel like I'm so very late to this palette, but I enjoyed it. They created something unique, and I always appreciate a unique color story with a good quality, and this one kind of just hit that mark, and I just had so much fun kind of playing around with the different colors that were in this palette. All right, number 2, we're getting down to it. This is the Nomad Whistler Snow Lodge palette. Now this palette, I felt so bad when it came out because I was so sick. I feel like I didn't do this palette justice and didn't like promote it as much as I had wanted to when the brand sent it to me, and I was so appreciative of them sending it to me ahead of time so I could have that opportunity. I was just so sick. It was a struggle bus, but I have used it since then, and I tried to make sure I did a reel, so I'll put the reel in here for you guys to see. So at least I did a little bit on my Instagram and YouTube. I created a YouTube video that was late, but I did get it up. Anyway, this palette is really pretty. If you like a good like winter themed, very blue themed palette, this is so much fun, and it has so many fun pops of colors to go with that kind of blue. Because if you look at it, there's really only like this middle section here and down here that's blue. Everything else is a nice mix of just very cool tone colors that really, you know, kind of show the theme of the palette when it comes to like a snow lodge type of palette. So I thought it was super fun. I love the black in it, the browns, the greens. The greens were a different hue or a different tone of green that I tend to reach for, so that was a lot of fun too. And then just mixing and matching these colors, mixing and matching the warmth with the cool and whatnot. This palette was also a fun color story that I really enjoyed exploring. And also the shimmers. I think the shimmers that stood out to me the most was very cool. This shimmer is intense. Like, it is beautiful. It is what I would call like a foiled looking on your eyes. It's beautiful. But then also the other ones, while they aren't as intense and as foil looking, they're very sparkly and beautiful and very shimmery on the eyes. And this one, Ski Bum and Powder Specialist, these two are duochrome. I don't know if they're multi-chrome, but they definitely have more than one shift to it. So I would call them duochromes, and they're very, very pretty when you use them. And depending on what you use them with, the different shifts can kind of stand out in the palette. So that was super fun. Like this Ski Bum is very blue, but I actually used it with more of the neutral colors, and it showed up very purple in that look. So that was like surprising to me, and I was like, oh, that's kind of like a fun, different kind of surprise. So that's a neat way you can use those duochrome or multi-chromes to really, you know, try it with different mattes to see what colors in the shadow will stand out. But overall, I've reviewed Nomad Cosmetics on my channel before, and I've always been a big fan of their matte formula, and this is no exception. The quality of their mattes is just so beautiful. They're so saturated, intense, yet they're so soft, but you like don't have to work to build them up. They just like pack on a punch so easily, so smoothly. Their lighter colors, I wouldn't mind having a little bit more depths to them, kind of like what I was talking about with the Flower Punk and the pink tones in there, where it kind of just disappeared. These two light green and blues definitely had that kind of lean towards it where it almost wanted to disappear into my skin, so I kind of had to build it up. So I wouldn't mind them having more of a punch and not being so very soft, but just something to note. And the quality of the shimmers was also very pretty, as I've kind of touched on already. There are shimmers that have the shift to them, I would say is a little bit more firmly pressed and like firmly in the pan than I feel like most of their shadows. I feel like for the most part they're very softly pressed into the pan, so they're very easy to pick up with a flat brush. But the Ski Bum and Powder Specialist, I feel like they were a little bit more firm, so you could, you know, use a little bit more pressure when picking them up with a brush, but they still picked up pretty nicely. I didn't have any serious complaints. And yeah, overall, I really had fun with this palette. This palette has a lot of really nice dark colors. I feel like it could have used like one or two, and I think I mentioned this in my review, but I felt like it could have used one or two more mid-tone colors. I don't even know what color that could have been because I'm terrible when it comes to this, but I just felt like it needed at least one more color, because when I was creating looks, when it came to like mid-tones or lighter colors, there really is only the green and the blue to work with. So that was a little bit interesting when I was going in here, because it was almost like there was too many darks and not enough lights, or maybe too many shimmers, because you guys know I always love as many mattes as I can get. But anyway, all that to say, as a whole, I really enjoyed this palette, even with its little quirks, and as a whole, definitely the quality of the palette is there. I was super impressed with it. I did create 3 looks, so if you want to see the looks that I created with it, you've already seen them on screen, but if you want to see how I did any of them, you can go over to the video and I'll kind of show you step by step and the shades that I use. But yeah, another fantastic palette from Nomad Cosmetics. Okay, and number 1, can you guys guess it? I'm sure you have by this point, but this is the collab with Odin's Eye and Angelica, the Hela palette, or the Hela palette. I'm honestly not sure which one is correct. Hela just rolled off my tongue when I was doing the video, but I've since I did that video heard Hela, so I am so sorry if I've been mispronouncing it this whole time. Anyway, this palette right here, I decided to put at number 1 because not only do I really, really like Odin's Eye's mattes when it comes to their formula, it's just so beautiful, but also I really enjoyed the shimmers. The majority of the shimmers in here. I want to say the only shade that I didn't like when it came to their shimmers was this pink one, because it was a little chunky and flaky, and therefore kind of hard to get an opaque and smooth application on the eyes. This black one was just a little bit chunky, but it was very opaque and very easy to get on your eyes. So not that I didn't really like dislike this. I definitely used it and thought it was fine. It was just a little bit chunky, but this one, it was the one kind of dud for me personally when it came to this palette. And after the first time I tried it, I never reached for it again. So besides that, these 3 green shimmers, beautiful, stunning, so easy to put on your eye. They're very like opaque. They go on very smoothly. They show up and just, you know, pack a little punch, and they have a little sparkle to it. And then this shade down here, double-sided. Absolutely beautiful. It is a gorgeous shifty shadow. I have it on my eyes today. It's the only thing on my lid, and it's showing up so green and like a lime yellow green gold. It's gorgeous. However, I've also used it with like the pinks in this palette, and it showed up like super hot pink. So it's one of those multi-chromes that just has so many special elements to it, and depending on what you mix it with when it comes to the mattes will depend on what colors come out in the shade. So that's absolutely beautiful. And then also River is a really special shadow as well. It's more of a deeper color, but it still has that kind of like specialness to it when it comes to the reflection or whatever color it gives you. I wouldn't really call it a multi-chrome. Maybe it's a multi-chrome. Again, I'm bad at multi-chromes and duochromes, but I definitely see two shades when I look at this. So it's definitely duo in my mind, but again, I don't know if it's in multi-chrome or duochrome. Anyway, it is a special shadow that is a lot of fun. So overall, that's why I'm putting this at number 1, because I really did enjoy all of the mattes in this palette, and I really did enjoy almost all of the shimmers in this palette. Switching over to the mattes, like I said, I really did enjoy it, and I really do like Odin's Eye when it comes to the formulation of their mattes. They're just so very intense, and they're very easy to blend. They're not like super incredibly soft like Nomad. If you've tried Nomad's formula, and kind of like I was talking about, it's so soft and so intense, or Menagerie Cosmetics. They're not quite that soft, but they have a soft feel to them, and they're so intense. So, you know, you pick up a little on your brush and you can just pack it on your lid and blend it out, and it's always very smooth to work with. And I don't know, it's just a formula that I've really enjoyed working with, and I just find to be, for the most part, foolproof. I can't remember how many looks that I did with this palette, but it's definitely the palette that I feel like I use the most out of all the palettes we're talking about today. And I never remember having any issues with the mattes, either the lighter mattes or the darker mattes. They just blend so easily together. They work so easily together. If there's one thing I could nitpick about it, is I felt like the mid-tone to light tone mattes in this palette, which are like Wolf, Moss, Underworld, and Rebirth, they were all a little like too close and too light. Like I wouldn't have mind one or two of them having more depth and more differentiation between the lighter tones, because I feel like I said, they were all kind of like samey when it came to the depth and the intensity of color. They were very similar in my personal opinion. But with that said, they were definitely also a color that you could start to use, and if you wanted more depth with that shade, you just kept putting more on, and it would get deeper and give you a little bit more depth in that shadow than the first application. I think you could see that in my initial video with this palette, so if you want to see that, you can go check out. I did 2 looks in there. Overall, it's just a palette that is a fun color story. It's a bit of a unique color story when it comes to being able to mix the green and the grunge with the pink, like the hot pink, and then these more very neutral tone colors. I found it to be a very fun and unique color story, and then just the quality of the shadows. That's why I had to put it at number 1, because I really do like Odin's Eye when it comes to the formulation of their mattes, and then these shimmers specifically. I don't always love Odin's Eye shimmers, but for this specific palette, as I said, love the majority of them. I will say briefly here though, and I mentioned this in my video, I'm not the biggest fan of the cover, and I understand. I got a couple people commenting saying, you know, it was the theme of the palette, hence why the cover makes sense, and I totally do understand that, and I didn't mean to like say that I didn't like it to kind of dog on the palette. I do think that they did a great job, and they really captured the theme of the palette. They captured what Angelica was going for. So it's absolutely definitely a me thing when it comes to this palette, and just being like a little, oh, like I don't prefer it. It's just not one of those beautiful palettes I like to display back here. It's a beautiful palette when it comes to the color story, but just the packaging isn't for me. But again, I totally understand she was going for the theme with her palette and being the whole aspect of the rebirth. I'm blanking exactly on her story with this palette, but I do think she did a great job keeping true to the theme of the palette. So not dogging Angelica, I think she did a beautiful job, and I totally understand everyone has different preferences when it comes to what they think is beautiful on a palette, and you know what they like to look at when it comes to palettes. So anyway, that was just a little something I wanted to kind of circle back on from my first video. So all around, an absolutely great palette, another great palette from Odin's Eye, another fantastic collab palette, another palette that I created so many looks that were just so fun to mix and match different colors together that I might not have thought to put them together previously. Kind of like this look today, I used the purple, which is Soot. I used that more purpley dark shade on the outer corner, and then I used Decay, kind of the grungy brown. There's a little bit of green in there, but it's mostly brown, and then I paired that with Underworld, which is like the really like lime green in the inner corner, and it's just a fun mix of colors with that, you know, multi-chrome on top to really bring out the yellow, because I had no idea what color would come out more with this combination. But all in all, a really fun palette, and with a color story that I really did enjoy using. Alright, so that's gonna do it for the last 8 palettes that I tried over the last 2 months. I hope you guys enjoyed this Palooza countdown review video. I know I always enjoyed being able to sit down and just talk to you guys about the palettes that I've been using recently and be able to give you guys hopefully a lot of details so that if you're kind of deciding on a palette or just looking at palettes and wanting to know quality, wanting to know what the formula is like and whatnot, hopefully these videos can be helpful for you. But honestly, I just enjoy sitting down talking about palettes. So that's the biggest reason why I look forward to these videos every single time. But that is gonna do it for me. 8 palettes down. We'll see how many is in the next video. Because I'm taking longer to kind of get through videos because of the pregnancy, I might not wait till 10. I might keep it shorter, kind of like today, and do 8 or 7 or whatever the case is, just so I don't get too far away. Because if the palettes are, like today, there was one palette I used in Christmas and now we're in March, so it's like, it's a little bit of a long time ago, and I like to keep them a little bit closer so I'm a little bit more clear and hopefully helpful when it comes to my reviews, because it's in the more recent history of my brain, so I don't have to think quite that far back, and I make sure I don't forget details is basically the biggest reason. So we'll see what the next palette Palooza is gonna be, but I have a ton of palettes to try. I have already been dabbling in a couple of them, but I cannot wait to get into them and just share with you guys more palettes, more reviews coming soon. But yeah, with all that said, that is gonna do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so very much for watching. If you want to continue getting daily-ish content, I'm over on Instagram. I'm LadyKatie92 over there, and I've been posting reels, up-close eye pictures, all that sort of thing. You can find me over there. And with all that said, I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys.